You don't belong in a first-class ghetto trash. Jennifer Collins's palm connected with Amara Washington's cheek with brutal force. Amara's head whipped sideways, her body slamming into the armrest. Blood bloomed on her bottom lip. 37 passengers gasped. Phones lifted instantly. Jennifer ripped the boarding pass from Amara's grip, then grabbed her coffee cup. Hot liquid splashed across Amara's face and vintage leather bag. That's what happens when people like you don't know your place. Amara wiped coffee from her eyes, her simple jeans and black sweater now stained and humiliating. The woman in 2A was already live streaming, viewer count climbing, 847, 1,203, 2,891. Jennifer towered over her, triumphant. Security's coming for you. But Amara's phone buzzed with a text that would change everything. She glanced at the screen, then back at Jennifer with the faintest smile. Have you ever been publicly humiliated by someone who had no idea who they were really attacking? The live stream counter hit 15,000 viewers in 30 seconds. Jennifer straightened her navy blazer, adrenaline pumping through her veins. 15 years as senior flight attendant had taught her one thing: show weakness once, lose control forever. The coffee-soaked woman in seat 1A needed to learn her lesson. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to gather your belongings. Jennifer's voice carried through the cabin, deliberately loud. You're being moved to coach where you belong. Amara dabbed blood from her lip with a tissue, her movements deliberate and calm. She studied Jennifer's name tag, then her employee ID number hanging from a retractable cord. The phone in her hand buzzed again. Text. Emergency board meeting moved to 10 a.m. Your call. She silenced it without responding. I'd like to speak with the gate agent, Amara said quietly. Jennifer laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. Honey, the gate agent isn't going to help you. Neither is anyone else. She gestured toward the other first-class passengers who were studiously avoiding eye contact. Look around. Nobody here thinks you belong either. The woman in 2A, username @TravelTruth, angled her phone for a better shot. Her live stream comments were exploding. Call the police. This is insane. What airline is this? Someone identify these people. Amara pulled out a leather portfolio, expensive but understated. Inside, her boarding pass showed details Jennifer had ignored. Priority diamond status, purchased 3 months ago, seat 1A specifically requested. She also carried a first-class ticket stub from her connecting flight, and something else Jennifer couldn't quite see. Flight 447 to Chicago, final boarding call, departure in 8 minutes. The gate agent's voice crackled through the speakers. Jennifer felt pressure building. Delayed flights meant paperwork, questions from supervisors, potential lost bonuses. She needed this resolved quickly. Look, Jennifer said, her tone shifting to fake reasonableness. I'm trying to help you avoid further embarrassment. Coach passengers sometimes accidentally end up in first class. It happens. But when you resist and cause scenes... She gestured at Amara's stained clothes. Well, you see where that leads. 2 more passengers boarded, slowing as they witnessed the confrontation. The man in the expensive suit paused, phone already recording. The woman behind him whispered to her companion. Amara opened her portfolio again, this time extracting what looked like a simple business card. She held it toward the light, revealing a holographic security strip that shimmered gold and blue. Jennifer had never seen anything like it. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Amara said. Jennifer didn't look at the card. The only misunderstanding is you thinking you can intimidate me with fake credentials. She turned toward the cockpit. Captain Morrison, we have a situation that requires your attention. The passenger live stream had reached 50,000 viewers. Comments were coming too fast to read, but 3 words kept appearing. Lawsuit, racism, fired. @TravelTruth had started a hashtag, #Flight447 Assault. Captain Morrison emerged from the cockpit, a weathered man in his 50s with silver hair and tired eyes. He'd seen everything in 23 years of flying, but physical altercations were rare. "What's the problem, Jennifer?" "Passenger in 1A doesn't have proper documentation for first class. She became aggressive when I asked her to move. I had to defend myself." Morrison looked at Amara's face, the red handprint still visible, the blood on her lip. Then at her coffee-stained clothes. His expression darkened. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Morrison. May I see your boarding pass?" Amara handed over her documents. Morrison studied them carefully. The priority diamond status, the purchase confirmation, the seat assignment. Everything appeared legitimate. "Jennifer, this passenger's documentation is valid." Jennifer's face flushed. "Captain, you don't understand. People like her, they forge documents all the time. That's enough." Morrison's voice cut through her protest. "Ma'am, I apologize for this incident. Jennifer will be filing a full report." But Jennifer wasn't finished. The live stream, the passengers watching, her authority being questioned, it all boiled over into rage. "Captain, I've been doing this job longer than anyone. I know a fake ticket when I see one, and I know trouble when I see it." She pointed at Amara. "Look at her. Does she look like she belongs in first class?" The words hung in the air like poison. Travel Truth's viewer count hit 75,000. Someone had identified the airline from the uniform. Their stock ticker was starting to trend on financial Twitter. Amara closed her portfolio and looked directly at Captain Morrison. "Captain, before this escalates further, I think you should know exactly who you're dealing with." Captain Morrison frowned at Amara's cryptic statement, but Jennifer cut him off before he could respond. "Oh, here we go." Jennifer rolled her eyes theatrically for the cameras. "Let me guess. You're somebody important? A celebrity? A politician's wife?" Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "Honey, I've heard every sob story in the book." The live stream counter jumped to 125,000. Comments flooded the screen faster than @Travel Truth could read them. Someone had posted the airline's customer service number. Others were tagging news outlets. 6 minutes to departure," came the gate agent's voice. "All passengers must be seated." Jennifer smiled coldly. "You hear that? Decision time. Coach seat or security escort. Your choice." But Amara's phone was buzzing continuously now, text after text lighting up her screen. She glanced at one. Stock down 3% in last 10 minutes. Board wants immediate response. Morrison stepped closer, studying the situation. In his decades of flying, he'd learned to read people. The passenger looked expensive, not flashy, but quality. Her leather goods were European. Her watch was understated, but clearly costly. And most importantly, she hadn't raised her voice once, despite being assaulted. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "if you have additional documentation that might help resolve this—" "Captain!" Jennifer's voice pitched higher. "With respect, you're being manipulated. This is exactly what they do. They stay calm, play victim, make us look bad." She gestured at the recording passengers. "She probably planned this whole thing for social media attention." The accusation sent whispers through the cabin. Several passengers stopped recording, looking uncertain, but then a new voice entered the fray. "Excuse me, what's happening here?" Susan Martinez, the regional flight supervisor, had boarded after receiving an alert about the delay. Short and stocky with steel gray hair, she radiated authority earned through 28 years in aviation management. Jennifer's face lit up. "Susan, perfect timing. We have a passenger with fraudulent documentation who became violent when confronted." Susan looked at Amara's face, the handprint, the blood, the coffee stains, then at Jennifer's pristine uniform and triumphant expression. Her stomach dropped. "Jennifer, step aside. Now." "But Susan—" "Now." The live stream viewer count hit 200,000. Flight 447, assault was trending nationally. 3 major news outlets had picked up the story. The airline's social media team was in crisis mode, but their standard responses were being drowned out by public outrage. Susan knelt beside Amara's seat. "Ma'am, I'm Supervisor Martinez. I sincerely apologize for what appears to have happened here. May I see your identification and boarding documentation?" Amara handed over her driver's license, passport, boarding pass, and the mysterious holographic card. Susan examined each document carefully. The ID was legitimate. Washington State, expensive address in Bellevue. The passport showed extensive international travel. The boarding pass was genuine priority diamond. But it was the holographic card that made Susan's hands tremble. "Ma'am, are you with the FAA?" "No," Amara said quietly. "Department of Transportation Oversight?" "No." Susan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Federal Air Marshal?" Amara shook her head, the faintest smile playing at her lips. "Something like that, but different." Jennifer, who had been straining to hear, pushed forward. "Susan, whatever she's telling you, it's lies. I've dealt with con artists before. They always claim to be someone important when caught." The gate agent's voice crackled again. "Flight 47, we show departure delay. Archer. Please advise status." Captain Morrison keyed his radio. "Ground control, we have a passenger service issue requiring resolution before departure." "Copy that. Be advised, we're receiving multiple calls about an incident aboard your aircraft. News crews are en route to the gate." Morrison's blood ran cold. News crews meant corporate attention. Corporate attention meant investigations, paperwork, and potential career consequences. He turned back to the group clustered around seat 1A, where Susan was still examining Amara's credentials with growing alarm. "Susan, what's the status?" Before she could answer, Jennifer exploded. "This is ridiculous! She's playing all of you! Look at her!" She gestured at Amara's simple clothes. "Does she look like someone important? Does she look like she belongs in first class with paying customers?" The racial implications hung heavy in the recycled cabin air. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. Travel Truth zoomed in on Jennifer's face, capturing every word for her 300,000 live viewers. That's when airport security arrived. 2 officers in dark uniforms walked down the aisle, hands resting casually on their equipment belts. The lead officer, a tall black man with sergeant stripes, surveyed the scene with professional calm. "We received reports of an assault," Sergeant Williams said. "Who needs medical attention?" Jennifer immediately pointed at Amara. "She attacked me. I was forced to defend myself. These witnesses can confirm she was being aggressive and disruptive." Williams looked around the cabin. Not a single passenger nodded or spoke up to support Jennifer's claim. Instead, several held up their phones, still recording. "Ma'am," Williams addressed Amara, "do you require medical attention?" "I don't think so," Amara replied, touching her lip. "Though I'd like the assault documented for potential legal proceedings." Williams nodded and began taking photos of her injuries with a departmental camera. The flash illuminated the clear handprint on her cheek, the split lip, the coffee stains across her clothing. "Anyone else witness what happened?" A dozen hands raised instantly. Travel Truth stepped forward. "Officer, I have the entire incident live-streamed. 400,000 people watched this flight attendant strike this woman without provocation." Williams' eyebrows rose. 400,000 witnesses was a prosecutor's dream. Jennifer's confidence finally began to crack. "That's not... The video doesn't show context. She was being threatening." "Ma'am," Williams said calmly, "threatening behavior typically doesn't involve sitting quietly in an assigned seat." Captain Morrison stepped forward, desperate to regain control. "Officers, if we could handle this quickly, we have a schedule to maintain." But Susan Martinez was still staring at Amara's holographic card, her face growing paler by the second. She looked up at Captain Morrison with an expression of pure panic. "Captain, we need to talk. Privately, Right now. Susan, whatever it is can wait. No, Susan's voice cracked. It absolutely cannot wait. Captain, we may have just committed a federal crime. The words hit the cabin like a physical blow. Jennifer's face went white. Captain Morrison's hands started shaking. Sergeant Williams stepped closer, his casual demeanor shifting to high alert. And through it all, Amara sat calmly in seat 1A, watching her phone as another text arrived. News crews at 3 major airports. This is now a national story. How do you want to proceed? She looked up at the circle of increasingly panicked faces surrounding her. I think, she said quietly, it's time we had an honest conversation. Susan Martinez pulled Captain Morrison 3 steps away, her voice barely audible over the cabin's tense murmur. Captain, look at this card. Her hands trembled as she held up the holographic identification. I've seen these before. Only twice. Both times during federal aviation audits. Morrison squinted at the shimmering surface. Corporate logos shifted beneath the hologram. Multiple airline brands, including their own. At the bottom, barely visible script read, Aviation Holdings Consortium, Board Authorization Level 9. His throat went dry. Susan, what exactly does Level 9 mean? It means she can ground our entire fleet with a phone call. Meanwhile, Jennifer watched the whispered conversation with growing anxiety. The live stream had passed 500,000 viewers. Flight 447 assault was trending in 12 countries. Her supervisor looked like she'd seen a ghost, and the captain's face had lost all color. Something was very, very wrong. Sergeant Williams stepped closer to Amara, his trained eye cataloging details he'd initially missed. Her shoes were Italian leather, easily $800. Her simple watch was a Patek Philippe, $30,000 minimum. The coffee had splashed across her bag, revealing a barely visible embossed logo, a stylized airplane inside a golden circle. Ma'am, Williams said quietly, I need to ask directly. What's your occupation? Amara glanced at her phone. Another text. Federal Aviation Administration requesting immediate conference call. Transportation Secretary's office also calling. She looked up at the sergeant, then at Captain Morrison and Susan, who were still whispering urgently. Jennifer stood frozen, sensing the shift in power but not understanding it. Sergeant Williams, before I answer that, I need to know, are you familiar with federal aviation regulations regarding assault on commercial aircraft? Yes, ma'am. It's a federal crime, prosecutable under multiple statutes. And if the assault victim happens to be a member of the airline's board of directors? Williams' eyes widened slightly. That would elevate it to a federal felony with mandatory minimums. Jennifer's breath caught. Board of directors? That was impossible. Board members were old white men in expensive suits, not young women in jeans and coffee stains. Captain Morrison broke away from Susan, his face ashen. He approached Amara with the careful steps of a man walking on thin ice. Ma'am, my supervisor has shown me your credential. We need to understand exactly who we're dealing with here. Amara stood slowly, her movement causing the entire cabin to fall silent. Even the live stream comments paused, 600,000 viewers holding their collective breath. She reached into her portfolio and withdrew a second document. Official letterhead, multiple signatures, a gold seal. She handed it to Captain Morrison. This is my appointment to the board of Skyline Aviation Holdings, dated 18 months ago. Skyline currently owns controlling interest in 47 commercial airlines worldwide, including this one. Morrison's hands shook as he read. The document was genuine. He could tell from the watermarks, the official seals, the legal language. At the bottom, a signature line. Amara Washington, Chief Executive Officer and Founder. CEO. Not just board member. CEO. Furthermore, Amara continued, her voice carrying clearly through the cabin, Skyline Aviation Holdings acquired its controlling stake in this airline specifically to address systemic issues with customer service and workplace culture. She gestured at her stained clothes, her injured face. Issues exactly like this. Jennifer felt the blood drain from her face. CEO. The word echoed in her mind like a death knell. She'd struck the CEO, on camera, in front of 700,000 witnesses. Susan stepped forward, her career flashing before her eyes. Ms. Washington, on behalf of the airline, I want to offer our most sincere— Susan. Amara's voice cut through the apology. In 18 months of ownership, how many discrimination complaints have been filed against this airline's staff? Susan's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The number is 847, Amara said calmly. I have the files. 847 complaints, resulting in 0 terminations and $23.4 million in legal settlements. Money that could have funded employee training, improved service, or been returned to shareholders. She turned to face the cabin, addressing not just the passengers but the live stream audience that had swelled to 800,000 viewers. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed why those statistics exist. This isn't about one bad employee. This is about a culture that allows discrimination to flourish because it's easier than accountability. Captain Morrison found his voice, though it came out as a croak. Ms. Washington, what happens now? Amara looked at her phone as another text arrived. CNN wants exclusive interview, stock down 18%. Board authorizes any action you deem necessary. She showed the screen to Morrison and Susan, watching their faces go from pale to gray. Now, Captain, we implement the changes I've been planning since the acquisition. She looked directly at Jennifer, who was pressed against the galley wall like a cornered animal. Starting with immediate termination of all staff involved in this incident. Jennifer finally found her voice. You can't do this. I have a union. I have rights. You had rights, Amara corrected. You forfeited them when you committed assault on federal property against a corporate officer. Sergeant Williams, I believe you have everything you need for charges? Williams nodded grimly. Battery, civil rights violation under federal statute, and given your position, ma'am, this qualifies for enhanced penalties under the Commercial Aviation Security Act. The reality hit Jennifer like a physical blow. Federal charges, prison time, her 15-year career destroyed, all because she'd seen a young black woman in simple clothes and assumed she didn't belong. But Amara wasn't finished. There's something else you all should know. She pulled out her phone and opened a recording app. I've been documenting workplace discrimination in the aviation industry for 2 years. This conversation, this incident, Jennifer's admission of profiling passengers based on appearance, it's all evidence in a federal investigation. She held up the phone, its red recording light clearly visible. An investigation that will now expand to include criminal charges. The cabin fell into absolute silence. 900,000 people watched the live stream, witnessing the moment when unchecked discrimination met its consequence. Jennifer slumped against the galley wall, tears streaming down her face. Susan stared at her ruined career. Captain Morrison wondered if he'd still have a job tomorrow. And Amara Washington, CEO and founder of a billion-dollar aviation empire, sat back down in seat 1A, the seat she'd paid for, the seat she'd been assaulted for occupying, the seat that had just become ground zero for the airline industry's reckoning with discrimination. Now, she said quietly, let's discuss how we're going to fix this. Amara's phone rang before anyone could respond. The caller ID showed, FAA Administrator, direct line. She answered on speaker. Ms. Washington, this is Administrator Patricia Chen. We're monitoring the situation via social media. Do you require federal intervention? The cabin fell silent. Even at Travel Truth's livestream comments stopped scrolling, as 1.2 million viewers absorbed the implications of the Federal Aviation Administration's top official personally calling a passenger. Administrator Chen, thank you for reaching out. We have local law enforcement on scene, and I believe we can resolve this internally with appropriate oversight. Understood. However, given the nature of the assault and your position, this incident falls under mandatory federal review. We'll need a comprehensive report within 24 hours. Jennifer's legs gave out. She slid down the galley wall to the floor, the full weight of federal investigation crushing her hopes of minimizing the situation. Of course, Amara replied. You'll have complete cooperation. She ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Legal Department, this is Davidson. Richard, it's Amara. We have a situation on Flight 447. I need emergency board authorization for immediate personnel actions and policy implementation. Ma'am, I have 12 attorneys monitoring your live stream. We're already preparing documentation. Captain Morrison stepped forward desperately. Ms. Washington, surely we can handle this through normal channels. Corporate discipline, retraining programs. Captain, Amara interrupted, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had built a billion-dollar empire. In the 18 months since acquisition, this airline has paid $23.4 million in discrimination settlements. Your normal channels have failed 847 times. She stood and faced the cabin, addressing both the passengers and her massive online audience. The average commercial airline generates $147 per passenger per flight. This aircraft has 189 passengers. Do the math. That's $27,783 in revenue for a single flight. Susan frantically pulled out her calculator, already knowing where this was heading. Now, Amara continued, factor in the cost of discrimination. Legal fees, settlements, regulatory fines, reputation damage, lost bookings. This single incident will cost approximately $50 million by year's end. The number hit the cabin like a shockwave. $50 million from one flight attendant's decision to strike a passenger. Her phone buzzed with an urgent text from the airline's CEO. Board meeting moved to emergency session. Media requesting immediate statement. Stock down 22%. Please advise course of action. Amara showed the text to Captain Morrison. Your CEO is requesting guidance from me, on my own aircraft, after your employee assaulted me. Morrison's career flashed before his eyes. 23 years of flying, gone because he'd failed to control his cabin crew. Richard, Amara continued into her phone, I need immediate termination paperwork for Jennifer Collins, employee ID 47291. Susan Martinez, regional supervisor, will face disciplinary review pending investigation of her oversight failures. Susan's face crumpled. Ms. Washington, please. I have 2 kids in college. I've worked here 28 years. 28 years of enabling discrimination, Amara cut her off. Your regional division has the highest complaint rate in the company. 127 incidents in 18 months under your supervision. Jennifer looked up from the floor, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Please, I have a mortgage. My husband lost his job last year. I can't. This will destroy my family. For the first time, Amara's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. Jennifer, you destroyed your own family the moment you decided that striking a passenger was appropriate behavior. Actions have consequences. Her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed the airline's corporate headquarters. Ms. Washington, this is CEO Michael Harrison. I'm calling to personally apologize and assure you that we'll take immediate corrective action. Michael, Amara replied coolly, still on speaker. You've been CEO for 3 years. In that time, discrimination complaints have increased 340%. What corrective action are you referring to? Silence on the line. Harrison clearly hadn't expected his owner to have statistics memorized. Furthermore, Amara continued, your quarterly reports consistently show declining customer satisfaction scores, with specific complaints about staff behavior toward minority passengers. What's your explanation? Ma'am, we've implemented diversity training programs. programs that have failed spectacularly. Jennifer completed your diversity training 8 months ago. How did that work out? The live stream counter hit 1.5 million viewers. Financial news channels were now covering the story live, with stock analysts discussing the potential impact on the airline industry as a whole. Amara pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through documents. Here's what's going to happen, effective immediately. First, all staff involved in this incident are terminated with cause. No severance, no references, no unemployment benefits. Federal assault charges proceed without corporate interference. Jennifer sobbed louder, but Amara continued relentlessly. Second, mandatory retraining for all flight staff conducted by federal civil rights instructors. Cost $12 million annually. Third, implementation of real-time bias monitoring systems on all aircraft. Body cameras for flight attendants, passenger feedback integration, and AI analysis of customer interactions. Susan looked up desperately. The union will never approve body cameras. The union doesn't have a choice. Federal mandate supersedes collective bargaining when passenger safety is involved. Amara's legal expertise showed. Under the Commercial Aviation Safety Act, assault prevention measures are non-negotiable. Captain Morrison tried one last appeal. Ms. Washington, these changes will cost hundreds of millions. The airline might not survive such expenses. Amara fixed him with a stare that had intimidated Fortune 500 CEOs. Captain, this airline generated $8.2 billion in revenue last year. My investment group contributed $2.3 billion in capital improvements. We can afford to treat passengers with basic human dignity. She scrolled to another document on her tablet. However, if current management believes these changes are too expensive, I'm prepared to exercise my option to purchase the remaining 53% of company shares. Full acquisition, effective within 60 days. The threat hung in the air like a nuclear option. Full acquisition meant complete management restructuring, mass layoffs, and total corporate overhaul. Her phone buzzed with a text from the Transportation Secretary's office. Federal investigation expanded to industry-wide review. Congress requesting testimony next week. Your cooperation appreciated. Amara showed the message to Captain Morrison and Susan, watching their faces go from pale to gray to green. One more thing, she said, addressing the cabin and her online audience. This incident will serve as the foundation for new federal legislation mandating anti-discrimination protocols across all transportation industries. Jennifer's actions today will reshape how airlines treat passengers nationwide. She looked directly at Jennifer, who was still sobbing on the floor. Your moment of hatred is going to protect millions of travelers from experiencing what I experienced today. That's your legacy, Jennifer. Not 15 years of service, but the federal law that bears your name. The Flight 447 Anti-Discrimination Act. The cabin remained silent except for Jennifer's muffled sobs and the distant sound of news helicopters circling the airport. Amara sat back in seat 1A and opened her email, beginning to draft the policy changes that would revolutionize commercial aviation. The revolution had begun at 30,000 feet, broadcast live to 1.8 million witnesses, and there was no going back. Within 48 hours, the aviation industry transformed. Jennifer Collins sat in federal custody, her mugshot trending across social media alongside headlines reading, "Flight Attendant Charged in Billion-Dollar Discrimination Case." The FBI's Civil Rights Division had fast-tracked her case, citing the severity of the assault and its national implications. Her union representative, David Martinez, looked across the metal table in the detention center. Jennifer, the federal prosecutor, is offering a plea deal. 18 months minimum security, $50,000 fine, permanent ban from aviation industry employment. Jennifer's hands shook as she signed the papers. 15 years of service ended with a felony conviction and a cell block number. Meanwhile, at Skyline Aviation Holdings headquarters, Amara stood before a wall of monitors displaying real-time implementation data. Her transformation of the airline was happening at unprecedented speed. Status report, she called to her emergency response team. Body cameras deployed to 12,000 flight attendants across all subsidiaries, reported Chief Technology Officer Sarah Kim. Real-time bias detection AI active on 847 aircraft. First-day results show 89% reduction in customer complaints. The technology was revolutionary. Microscopic sensors analyzed voice patterns, facial expressions, and body language during passenger interactions. When bias indicators spiked, supervisors received immediate alerts, allowing intervention before incidents escalated. Legal update, Amara continued. General Counsel Richard Davidson pulled up federal documents. The Transportation Department has fast-tracked the Flight 447 Anti-Discrimination Act. Congressional hearings begin Monday. Early polling shows 78% public support. The proposed legislation mandated bias training, real-time monitoring, and severe penalties for discrimination across all transportation sectors. Airlines, trains, buses, and ride-sharing services would all fall under federal oversight. On her tablet, Amara reviewed the human cost. Susan Martinez had been demoted but retained as a diversity training coordinator, her 28 years of experience redirected toward preventing future incidents. Captain Morrison faced a 6-month suspension and mandatory sensitivity training, but would keep his job. What about industry-wide adoption? Amara asked. Remarkable, replied Chief Operating Officer James Wright. 17 major airlines have implemented similar policies voluntarily. Delta announced a $200 million diversity initiative yesterday. United is installing bias detection systems fleet-wide. Southwest pledged zero-tolerance enforcement. The live stream had created a domino effect. No airline wanted to be the next company facing federal investigation and social media destruction. Proactive change was cheaper than reactive damage control. Amara's phone buzzed with an update from the Federal Aviation Administration. Administrator Chen's text read, "Preliminary investigation complete. Your airline now has the industry's highest customer satisfaction rating. Requesting case study for national implementation." The irony wasn't lost on her. The airline where she'd been assaulted was now the industry standard for inclusive service, but the most significant change was happening at ground level. In training facilities across the country, 45,000 airline employees were completing emergency bias education. The curriculum was intensive. Unconscious bias recognition, de-escalation techniques, federal legal consequences, and empathy development through role-playing exercises. Maria Santos, a flight attendant from Phoenix, raised her hand during a session. "Instructor, what if we genuinely don't recognize our own biases?" The instructor, Dr. Angela Roberts, a civil rights expert hired by Skyline, nodded. "That's exactly why we have real-time monitoring. The AI doesn't judge intent, only impact. If your behavior patterns suggest bias, you get immediate feedback to adjust." The system was already working. In the first week, 237 potential discrimination incidents were detected and prevented through supervisor intervention. Flight attendants received real-time coaching instead of post-incident punishment. Amara reviewed the financial impact on her quarterly report. Implementation costs, $127 million. Expected savings from reduced legal settlements and improved reputation, $400 million annually. Return on investment, 315%. But the human impact mattered more. Passenger testimonials flooded social media. An elderly Muslim woman tweeted, "First time in years I wasn't randomly selected for extra security screening." A disabled veteran posted, "Flight attendant actually helped me with my bags instead of sighing loudly." The hashtag Respect in Flight hashtag, created by @TravelTruth, had generated 12 million posts celebrating improved airline experiences. Amara walked to her office window, looking down at Seattle's skyline. Her phone showed 847 unread messages, interview requests from major networks, speaking invitations from corporations, and book deal offers from publishers. But the message that mattered most came from her younger sister Maya. Watched your testimony to Congress. Dad would be proud. You turned pain into progress. Their father had died 5 years earlier after facing similar discrimination during his immigrant journey from Ethiopia. He'd taught Amara that true power meant lifting others up, not tearing them down. Her assistant knocked and entered. "Ms. Washington, the President's office called. They want to discuss appointing you to the National Transportation Safety Board." Amara smiled. The girl who'd been slapped for sitting in first class was being considered for federal appointment. "Schedule it for next month," she replied. "I want to see our first quarter discrimination data before taking on additional responsibilities." The data was already promising. Complaints down 91%. Customer satisfaction up 67%. Employee retention improving as workplace culture shifted from fear-based compliance to respect-based service. Most importantly, no passenger had been physically assaulted on any Skyline-affiliated airline since Flight 447. Jennifer's legacy was indeed federal law, but not the way she'd intended. The Flight 447 Act passed Congress with bipartisan support, creating the strongest anti-discrimination protections in transportation history. The final irony came 6 months later, when Jennifer was released from minimum security prison. Unable to work in aviation, she took a job at a customer service call center. Her first training manual was titled Dignity First: Lessons from Flight 447. Her former victim's philosophy had become her rehabilitation curriculum. Amara kept a framed photo on her desk, the moment from Flight 447 when she'd shown her CEO credentials to Captain Morrison, not as a reminder of her humiliation, but of her transformation from victim to victor through systematic change rather than personal revenge. The caption beneath read, "True power isn't showing people who you are, it's helping them become who they should be." Aviation would never be the same. Neither would transportation, hospitality, or any industry where service providers held power over customers. The live stream seen by 1.8 million people had created a new standard of accountability that rippled far beyond a single flight. Sometimes revolution begins not with violence, but with one person refusing to accept unacceptable behavior and having the power to ensure it never happens again. The quiet strength of systemic change had proven more devastating than any lawsuit and more permanent than any punishment. 2 years later, Amara Washington stood at the podium of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, addressing delegates from 193 countries. Transportation discrimination affects 847 million people globally each year, she began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had transformed an industry. The Flight 447 incident proved that change is possible when we refuse to accept the unacceptable. The audience included transportation ministers, civil rights leaders, and technology innovators who had gathered for the inaugural Global Transportation Equity Summit. The event existed because a flight attendant had made the worst decision of her career on a live-streamed aircraft. Behind Amara, a massive screen displayed statistics that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. 94% reduction in transportation discrimination complaints globally. 156 countries implementing bias detection technology. $12.7 billion invested in equity training programs worldwide. 0 recorded physical assaults on commercial aircraft in 18 months. The ripple effects had exceeded every projection. What began as airline reform had expanded to trains, buses, ride-sharing services, hotels, and restaurants. The Dignity First protocol was now taught in business schools across 6 continents. Jennifer Collins watched the speech from her small apartment in Phoenix, where she worked as a customer service representative for a medical billing company. The irony of her situation wasn't lost on her. She spent her days being yelled at by frustrated patients, experiencing the powerlessness she'd once inflicted on others. But Jennifer had changed, too. She'd completed addiction counseling, alcohol had fueled her workplace anger, bias training, and anger management therapy. Her parole officer had become her mentor, helping her understand the psychology behind her actions. She'd even written a letter to Amara, not seeking forgiveness, but acknowledging the courage it took to transform hatred into healing. She never sent it. The letter sat in her drawer next to a newspaper clipping. Former flight attendant credits victims Grace for personal transformation. In Seattle, at Travel Truth, real name Jessica Chen, had parlayed her viral live stream into a career as a transportation equity advocate. Her documentary, The Slap That Changed Everything, had won an Emmy and sparked similar reforms in healthcare, retail, and hospitality industries. Her TikTok account, now followed by 4.8 million people, featured daily stories of positive service interactions, celebrating progress while maintaining vigilance against backsliding. Captain Morrison, after completing his suspension and sensitivity training, had become one of the airline's most effective diversity ambassadors. He flew the same route monthly, personally ensuring every passenger felt welcomed and respected. His logbook entry from Flight 447 had become legendary in aviation circles. Day discrimination died at 30,000 feet. But the most profound change was generational. Airlines now recruited flight attendants differently, prioritizing emotional intelligence and cultural competency alongside safety training. New hires underwent 200 hours of bias education, more time than Jennifer had received in 15 years of employment. Aviation schools integrated the Flight 447 case study into mandatory curricula. Students analyzed every decision point, learning how unconscious bias could escalate into federal crimes within minutes. The technology revolution continued expanding. Skyline's bias detection AI, initially designed for airlines, now operated in hospitals, schools, courtrooms, and police departments. Real-time feedback prevented discrimination before it occurred, creating systemic culture change through immediate accountability. Amara's foundation, Quiet Power Initiative, had distributed $500 million in grants supporting discrimination victims and funding bias prevention programs globally. The foundation's motto, "Transform pain into progress," reflected her father's immigrant wisdom about turning suffering into strength. Her book, The Power of Quiet Strength, had spent 47 weeks on bestseller lists, but she donated all royalties to transportation workers' education funds. Even Jennifer's former colleagues received training opportunities through programs her assault had funded. The corporate world had taken notice. Fortune 500 companies recruited Amara as a board member, seeking her expertise in crisis management and cultural transformation. Her quiet leadership style, data-driven, empathetic, focused on systems rather than individuals, had influenced executive training programs worldwide. But perhaps the most meaningful change was personal. Amara still flew commercial, often in economy class, testing her own company's commitment to equal treatment. Passengers occasionally recognized her, but she discouraged special treatment, preferring to experience service as any customer would. Last month, flying from Los Angeles to Chicago, she'd watched a young flight attendant handle a difficult passenger with perfect professionalism. The passenger, drunk, belligerent, making racial comments, had been de-escalated through techniques pioneered after Flight 447. No violence, no humiliation, no viral videos. Just human dignity preserved through proper training and systemic support. That attendant had been hired after Jennifer's termination, trained in facilities funded by discrimination settlement money, using protocols developed from federal legislation bearing Jennifer's name. The circle of justice was complete. Amara's speech in Geneva concluded with a challenge. Every person in this room has witnessed discrimination. The question isn't whether injustice exists, it's whether we have the courage to live stream our response to it. She looked directly into the cameras broadcasting her words to 67 million viewers worldwide. True change happens when ordinary people refuse to accept extraordinary cruelty as normal. When they document it, share it, and demand better. When they transform their worst moments into everyone else's best opportunities. The delegates rose in sustained applause, but Amara's attention focused on her phone, where real-time social media responses were flooding in. This is why I share every discrimination story I see. Recording bias when I witness it. Your courage inspires mine. Starting diversity training at my company because of your example. These real-life stories of transformation proved that touching stories could become catalysts for systematic change. Black stories of triumph over adversity resonated globally, inspiring action across cultures and continents. Life stories like Flight 447 demonstrated how individual courage could reshape entire industries. The live stream that began with hatred had evolved into a movement powered by hope. As Amara left the podium, her phone buzzed with a message from her airline's customer service department. Year 2 results: 99.7% passenger satisfaction. Zero discrimination complaints this quarter. The transformation is complete. But she knew the work was never truly complete. Vigilance was the price of dignity, and every flight, every interaction, every moment of service was an opportunity to choose respect over discrimination. If this story moved you, your voice matters in creating change. Share this video with someone who needs to see that quiet strength can transform entire industries. Document discrimination when you witness it. Your phone might be someone's only evidence for justice. Have you experienced discrimination while traveling? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience could inspire the next breakthrough in civil rights protection. Subscribe for more real-life stories proving that one person's courage can change the world. Like this video, if you believe dignity should be universal, and hit the bell icon for notifications when we share more life stories of transformation. Remember, you don't need to own the airline to demand respect. You just need to refuse to accept disrespect as acceptable. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with someone quietly refusing to move from the seat they paid for. What's your Flight 447 moment going to be?
The story you heard today wasn't cleaned up. It was told exactly as it happened. At Black Voices Uncut, we believe that's the only way truth can live. If you felt something, hit like, comment, and your reaction, and subscribe. Every week, we bring you voices that refuse to be silenced.